Can a man who co-founded one of the deadliest street gangs in history truly find redemption on death row? Stanley Tookie Williams' final hours would reveal a story so complex, so emotionally devastating, that even governors, celebrities, and Nobel Prize committees couldn't agree on whether justice was truly served. This death row story isn't just about crime and punishment, it's about the very soul of the American justice system. If you're fascinated by true crime documentaries that go deeper than the headlines, hit that like button and subscribe to be part of our growing community. Let's dive into one of death row's most haunting stories. Before Stanley Williams became death row inmate W-76,700, before the murder trial that captivated a nation, before the execution that divided America, he was just a 6-year-old boy moving to Los Angeles with a dream. Born December 29, 1953, in New Orleans, Louisiana, Stanley Williams came into this world to a 17-year-old mother. His father, gone before Tookie's first birthday. In 1959, his mother packed everything they owned and moved west to Los Angeles, settling in South Central, a neighborhood that would soon become synonymous with gang violence. While his mother worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table, young Stanley became what social workers call a latchkey kid, alone, unsupervised. The schoolyard became his battlefield. Bullied for his Louisiana accent, mocked for his poverty, Stanley learned a brutal lesson early. In South Central, you either become the predator or you become prey. So he chose violence. He built his body into a weapon, pumping iron until his frame became intimidating, his presence commanding respect through fear. But here's the wait-what moment that changed American crime history forever. At just 17 years old, in 1971, Stanley Tookie Williams met Raymond Washington. Together, these two teenagers would create something that would outlive them both, something that would spread like a virus across America and eventually around the world. They called it the Crips. What started as protection quickly morphed into something darker. The Crips weren't just a gang. They became an empire of violence, drugs, and territory wars that would claim thousands of lives over the decades. And Tookie Williams? He was the enforcer, the muscle, the man whose reputation made grown men cross the street. But beneath that hardened exterior, psychologists would later argue, was a young man suffering from complex PTSD, abandoned by his father, failed by the education system, and trapped in a cycle of poverty and violence that America's inner cities know all too well. This doesn't excuse what came next. Nothing can. But it might explain how a scared little boy from New Orleans became one of the most feared men in Los Angeles. The night that sealed his fate, February 28, 1979, roughly 4 a.m., most of America is sleeping. But in Whittier, California, Stanley Williams and his companions pull up to a 7-Eleven convenience store. They're not there for coffee. The robbery itself nets them a pathetic $120. But what happens next will haunt everyone involved for the rest of their lives. Albert Lewis Owens, a 26-year-old U.S. Army veteran working the overnight shift to support his family, becomes more than a robbery victim. Williams allegedly orders Owens into the back room. The young veteran complies, probably thinking this nightmare will end if he just cooperates. He gets on his knees, possibly praying, definitely terrified. 2 shotgun blasts to the back. Albert Lewis Owens dies on that cold convenience store floor, his blood pooling beneath fluorescent lights that buzz indifferently above his body. For $120, for pocket change, for nothing. But Williams wasn't done. Wait, the story gets darker. Just 12 days later, on March 11, 1979, Williams breaks into the Brookhaven Motel in Los Angeles. Inside, he finds a Taiwanese immigrant family trying to live the American dream. 67-year-old Tsai Shai-yang, his 63-year-old wife Yen-Yi Yang, and their 43-year-old daughter Ye Chen-lin are working late, probably doing the books, probably talking about their hopes for tomorrow. They never saw tomorrow. 3 execution-style murders, a family wiped out, all for the money in the motel register. 4 innocent lives extinguished in less than 2 weeks. But here's where this death penalty case becomes controversial. There was no DNA evidence linking Williams to these crimes. No fingerprints. No murder weapon recovered. The prosecution's case relied heavily on witness testimony, some from jailhouse informants with questionable credibility, others from accomplices who got reduced sentences for their cooperation. Williams would maintain his innocence for 26 years. Right up until his final hours on death row, he insisted he didn't kill those 4 people. Was he lying? Was the jury wrong? Or was this a criminal mastermind playing the victim until the very end? The answer depends on who you ask, and that's what makes this true crime story so devastating. The murder trial of Stanley Williams became a spectacle. The prosecution painted him as a remorseless gang leader, a cold-blooded killer who bragged about his murders. They brought witnesses who testified that Williams laughed about killing Albert Owens, that he made the sounds of the shotgun blast, boom boom, while mimicking Owens begging for his life. The defense argued police misconduct, coerced testimony, and racial bias. They pointed out that the jury had no black members in a case involving a black defendant. They highlighted the lack of physical evidence. They questioned why supposed eyewitnesses waited weeks to come forward. It didn't matter. In 1981, the jury deliberated and returned with their verdict, guilty on all 4 counts of first-degree murder. The sentence? Death. Stanley Williams would spend the next 24 years and 8 months waiting to die, his execution date set and postponed multiple times as appeals wound through the courts. But something unexpected happened during those long years on death row, something that would turn this straightforward murder case into one of the most debated death penalty controversies in modern history. The redemption arc that shocked the world. For the first 6.5 years of his death row incarceration, Williams was everything the prosecution said he was: violent, angry, dangerous. He spent 1,588 consecutive days in solitary confinement for assaults and violent incidents. The system had written him off, another monster in a cage, waiting for the needle. Then, in the early 1990s, something broke inside Stanley Williams. Or maybe something healed. He would later attribute his transformation to God, to a spiritual awakening that forced him to confront the monster he'd become. In 1993, journalist Barbara Becknell visited San Quentin, researching a book about the Crips. She expected to meet a monster. Instead, she met a man desperate to atone. Williams asked for her help, not to prove his innocence, not to get him off death row, but to publish children's books. Books warning kids away from gangs. Books telling young people to make different choices than he did. Wait, what? A death row inmate, convicted of murdering 4 people, writing children's books? It sounds like fiction. But it's true crime fact. By 1996, Becknell sold Williams' book series to Rosen Publishing Group. Tookie Speaks Out Against Gang Violence became a 10-book series used in schools, juvenile detention centers, and community programs across America and internationally in Africa and Switzerland. Williams didn't keep a penny. All proceeds went to non-profits fighting gang violence, including Mothers Against Gang Violence. But here's where this gets really controversial. Williams refused multiple offers from major New York publishers, who wanted him to write graphic, violent gang memoirs. Books that would have made him money, given him attention. He said no. He insisted on keeping his message focused on prevention, on redemption, on steering kids away from the path that led him to death row. In 2004, Williams helped broker the Tookie Protocol for Peace, a gang truce agreement between the Crips and their sworn enemies, the Bloods. President George W. Bush sent him a commendation letter. Think about that. A death row inmate receiving recognition from the President of the United States for peace work. Williams was nominated 5 times for the Nobel Peace Prize and 4 times for the Nobel Prize in Literature. Swiss Parliament member Mario Ferre formally nominated him, calling his anti-gang work extraordinary. Celebrities like Jamie Foxx, who played Williams in the film Redemption, Snoop Dogg, and human rights activists rallied to his cause. Over 50,000 people signed petitions asking California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to grant clemency. Even a panel of federal judges on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, while upholding his death sentence, did something rare. They urged the governor to consider commutation, praising Williams' laudable efforts and good works and accomplishments since incarceration. So here's the moral question that still haunts this case. If a man truly changes, if he spends 24 years trying to save the lives of children who might follow his path, if he becomes a force for good from inside a death row cell, does he still deserve to die? Or does redemption matter? The final hours, December 8, 2005, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger holds a clemency hearing. The world watches. Families of the victims demand justice, supporters demand mercy. The governor has the power to stop the execution with a signature. Less than 12 hours before the scheduled execution, Schwarzenegger announces his decision: clemency denied. His statement is devastating. The facts do not justify overturning the jury's verdict. Stanley Williams insists he is innocent and that he will not and should not apologize or otherwise atone for the murders. Without an apology and atonement for these senseless and brutal killings, there can be no redemption. That's the key. Williams never admitted guilt, never apologized to the victims' families. His supporters say that's because he was innocent. His detractors say it proves his redemption was a calculated lie, a death row con job to avoid the needle. December 13, 2005, San Quentin State Prison. Stanley Williams's last meal? He declined one. His last words? There were none. At 12:01 a.m., the execution began. Williams was strapped to a gurney in the death chamber. The lethal injection process involves 3 drugs: sodium thiopental to render the inmate unconscious, pancuronium bromide to paralyze the respiratory system, and potassium chloride to stop the heart. It's supposed to be humane. Witnesses say Williams appeared to struggle, that it took 11 minutes, an unusually long time. At 12:35 a.m., Stanley Tookie Williams was pronounced dead. He was 51 years old. Outside the prison, hundreds protested. Some celebrated. Most just felt the weight of a broken system that couldn't figure out what to do with a man who was both a killer and a lifesaver, both a gang founder and a Nobel Peace Prize nominee. His funeral drew 2,000 mourners to the 1,500-seat Bethel AME Church. Gang members sat next to celebrities, religious leaders next to activists. Barbara Becknell, his friend and advocate, made a vow: "We're going to prove his innocence." 18 years later, that promise remains unfulfilled. The execution of Stanley Tookie Williams raises questions that America still can't answer. Did he really commit those murders, or was he convicted on shaky testimony and racial bias? If he did kill those 4 innocent people, can 2 decades of good works erase that evil? Should someone who helped save children from gang violence still be executed? Or does redemption require admission of guilt? 4 families lost their loved ones in 1979. Albert Owens never got to see his children grow up. The Yang family's American dream ended in blood. They deserved justice. But did Williams' execution give them that? Or did it just add a fifth body to the count? So what do you think? Did the punishment fit the crime, or did the system fail again? Can someone who co-founded the Crips truly find redemption? Should Williams have been executed, or should his anti-gang work have earned him life imprisonment instead? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the haunting world of death row.